Well, hey, North Metro, thanks so much for joining us. I'm really excited. We've been doing these interviews while we've all been in our homes and going through this crisis. And today I'm really excited. This is a different one. This is really just one for actually you and your family or you and your teams, for those of you who have businesses and are part of organizations where you lead and manage people. So I'm really excited. I've got my friend Bryan Coley with me today. And Bryan is the CEO of Reel Experiences. That's REEL Experiences. Has to do with movies. And I'm really excited about it. So Bryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, man, for having me. It's been, it's a crazy time. So it's good to talk about movies, right?
Exactly, because we know that a lot of people are watching them right now. I'm sure Netflix and Disney Plus and all those subscriptions have probably gone through the roof while people are having to shelter at home. So tell me a little bit about what you do. I mean, let me say this first. We were introduced by a mutual friend who's an executive was with Chick-fil-A, and just saying, hey, this is a great team building thing. You really ought to take your team through. So we said, okay, great. And so next thing we know, we're picking our top 10 movies. And the net is our team says to this day, this is one of the best, if not the best thing we've ever done as a team. And so it was a great experience for us. And I would love for other people to know about it. So you take it from there. Tell us about Reel Experiences.
Yeah, so I'm trying to do my short story of my life, but ultimately I graduated from NYU Film School, worked for Turner Broadcasting for about 12 years, quit, started a theater company because somebody asked me, if you won the lottery, what would you do? And I said, well, I would want to start a theater company. He was like, why aren't you doing it? And so I did it, and it tells you how wonderful my wife is, because I quit all those cushy benefits from Turner and ultimately started a nonprofit, woohoo, which you know all about. So
Yes.
yeah, there it is. But I felt really strong about the intersection of faith, my Christian faith and art, and what I was not seeing out there. I was seeing a whole lot of cliche stuff. And so we began as a writers group that became a theater group. And how all this kind of comes to bear in what I'm doing now is it's really cool, because you kind of see the trail of God moving to this place where I am right now. And what we used to do is we would commission writers, because you know as well as I do that that movies out there that are, quote, Christian suffer from scripts, really good scripts, and so we knew that we needed to solve the problem of the lack of good writers, lack of good scripts. And so we were trying to get to their most authentic expression of what is the script that only they could write. And so I just started thinking about it, like, what moves you? Like, what ultimately moves you as a writer, And so it became their top 10 movies. And we started mining their top 10 movies as a means of brainstorming and as a means of finding the script that only they could write, and coming from an authentic place. And so fast forward, we're working with screenwriters. Eventually I make a movie, and I'm in an edit suite for about a year, and I only see computers, which everybody understands now, no human beings. And so I decided to try what we were doing with the writers, with a small group at my church, and it just blew up. People were changing their lives based on the insights that were coming out of their top 10 movies. And as I just started exploring that more, I realized that God had placed this kind of treasure map in people's movies. And it makes sense when you start thinking about it. Like, if something's moving you, then obviously there's something about your story in that God's placed in that to move you. If you're moved to tears, moved to laughter, moved to anger even, that there's something that God's wanting to say to you. And so we just started, doing all this 20 years of stories just kind of exploded. And we were trying all kinds of different story techniques to look into people's movies, different lenses to look at, and then different audiences. So we started doing it for married people, and we saw, oh my gosh, this is an incredible way for married people to see each other in ways that they haven't seen each other. And so eventually I just kind of gave myself over to this. And what I found was that I think, from a spiritual perspective, that we, especially as Protestant, growing up as Protestant, I think the idea of image and metaphor, and something that the Catholic Church, I think, does pretty well, is that sense of the beauty of imagery and the beauty of metaphor that is a part of the gospel. And so I think God still is in that business today. I still think that he's in the business of story, obviously, but I think he's also in the business of making sure we have visuals, making sure that those visuals are something that penetrate, who we are, and give us a visual. If I'm with a married couple, like for instance you and Denise, and I am allowing Denise to see what it looks like for you to be loved through Harry Potter, then she has that visual, and it's surreal that she's playing in her head to go, oh yeah, I'll always remember that this is the way Rob wants to be loved.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I'm doing it today, and why I feel even more passionate about it in this moment, because what we've seen is that not only do people get to see their story through their movies, but the feeling of being seen is something that we've kind of really found as the secret sauce to everything.
Yeah.
Even being seen by God in a transcendent way,
Yes.
that how in the world did God get this huge insight out of Dumb and Dumber, for me, and so only God could have done that, and only God could talk to me that personally,
Yeah.
So it makes me feel seen by God, like God cares about my story.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, I think it's just one of those things where what we saw was people were connecting, especially in corporate teams. So we've been working with a lot of corporations, and just seeing the vulnerability that comes out of this in such a fast way, especially for teams that are disconnected. Our team, this was way before this, where we were seeing it really bring back engagement and bring back a sense of authentic connection with each other.
Well, I will say, what was uncanny for us as a team was to say, pick your top 10 movies. And at first, to be honest with you, where I was like, top 10 movies, I'll never be able to pick I'll never be able to find 10. And the way your website is like, hey, you have all these movies, and you guys have the posters from each one, the image from each one. And when you start going through, we were all like, I have 20, and it won't let me, I can't even narrow it down. So we had to narrow it down. And then we finally took the time, we narrowed each of us down. And what was uncanny is really and truly just the threads that we saw within the movies. Even as we say this, I want people to understand that this is a really, really cool thing, because like what we saw, you guys asked deep questions, and you asked questions after questions to really kind of probe in. And it was fascinating, all of us. And we did make a joke. Some people were like, oh, well, I chose Dumb and Dumber. How can that ever say something about me, while I also have Braveheart, and I also have It's a Wonderful Life? And it was uncanny. And then, of course, Denise and I had the opportunity to do the love night, right? Where we got with couples to see, hey, what movies speak love to you? And you made the reference to Harry Potter. I was like, oh my goodness, that's true. There's a scene in Harry Potter that really shows, and it was just amazing. And what you don't expect is you got husbands and wives that were crying, at specific moments. It really was so deep and telling, and it was a gift. It was a gift, and it's a fascinating thing that God's gifted you to, but also called you to. And so, let me also say this: you do something very unique. You do what I think you call it making the Oscar predictions, and not who will win the Oscar, but actually what the movies that are nominated for Oscars, what they're actually telling us about our culture. And you definitely weave in even the Christian perspective. And what happened this year, in my opinion, is fascinating. It's actually one of the reasons why I thought I have got to do an interview with Bryan just about this, in light of where we are. And so, can you tell us a little bit about kind of what happened this year and what you observed?
Yeah. So, obviously we were seeing the impact of how people's top 10 was a way in which they were. We were seeing a story kind of come out of their top 10, that people were finding their top 10. In their movie, or excuse me, they're finding their story in their top 10 movies. And so I thought about that, and on a micro level, that was happening individually, and God was kind of showing that he was involved in people's story that way, like he was wanting to say, hey, I see you, and I know your story, and he was doing that with people's individual top 10. So I was like, is it possible that this could be on a macro level too? Like, what about our movies as a culture, as an American culture? And so about 7 years ago, I started diving into the Oscars, and not the box office, because the box office, I started looking at that, and it just felt like it was it just didn't seem as relevant. Maybe it says a little bit about where we are or where we have been. But when I looked at the Oscars, all of a sudden everything just started lighting up. I mean, as far as looking at the Oscar nominees, so I take the Oscar nominees, I don't take just the winner, but I take the Oscar nominees as if it's a top 10 list, right?
Right.
And as if it's America's top 10 list, right? So I look at it from that perspective and go, God, what do you want to say about our story, our narrative as a culture through this? And the cool thing about the Oscars is many people don't realize this, but you know, the studios basically, they don't look at the Oscars as making money. So it's just for, you know, putting the best art out there each year.
Right.
And so when you take commerce out of the equation, then the idea of something being much more prophetic is much more in the mix, right? Because you have all these artists who are the best artists of our time, who are making stuff that are passion projects of theirs,
right?
In which the reason to make the passion project is to say something, right? And so then if you pull all those movies together into a palette and go, God, what are you trying to say through this? Then you can see some you know, themes. And so I know it's going to sound dramatic and it's going to sound like, you know, unbelievable, but I could walk you through it. And I do each year. I do a thing on Oscar Sunday evening where I walk everybody through and show that the Oscars kind of were foreshadowing when Trump was emerging. The Oscars were foreshadowing the Me Too movement. The Oscars were foreshadowing when all the women kind of came into Congress, you know, and even a little bit, the Oscars were foreshadowing a year ago the impeachment, actually. But this year, oh my gosh, it was like I decided this year to kind of blow it out a little bit and like have different people talk about the theme that I was seeing. So I'll present the theme each year. Yeah. And then this year I had different speakers, you know, speak to it. And so this year, the theme was that came out of it. In fact, if it's okay, I'd like to show you a video because I feel like even when I say it, people are going to be like, oh, yeah, he made that up after this whole thing happened. So I want to show you the video of me talking that night. Let me work a little Zoom magic and see if I can get it to come up.
Will we be our brother and sister's keeper? You know, that we're dealing with, what are we devoted to? What are we really devoted to? We need to separate out the things we don't need to be devoted to, and in the midst of fighting and all the things that are going on, and will we be our brother and sister's keeper? Because in all of these movies, I mean, I started looking at it and going, oh yeah, like Jojo Rabbit, he actually finds that his mom is keeping a Jewish girl, right? In The Irishman, De Niro is assigned to be Hoffa's keeper. You know, all of a sudden it was just like blowing up all over the place. So here's the question, which we'll talk about tonight. To remain a we, it seems like these movies are telling us that in the midst of an escalating war and battles, for the sake of our children, we have to test our devotions to determine if we will be our brothers and sisters' keeper. Parasite shows us a cautionary tale of what it looks like when we're not our brother's keeper because we're just trying to survive. You know, we're just trying to get that opportunity. I don't know. I just feel like there's probably something that might happen this year that tests this idea, you know. I don't know what it could be. I don't know how it could play out even beyond the election.
That was that night, not having any idea what a coronavirus would be and how we would step into this moment of testing our devotion, you know, to money, to anything. You know, at this time, our devotions are being tested. Yeah. But ultimately, trying to figure out, excuse me, whether we'll be our brother and sister's keeper is pretty much what we're doing right now. You know, that's what we're doing by social distancing and everything else. So it was kind of, it was one of those moments where I've seen this happen before each year, but I was kind of, you know, throughout the whole process, I kept, you know, like your wife works with me, you know, at Real, and I kept going, she kept sending me clips, and I kept going, hey, you know, are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? This is incredible the way God's rolling this out. And even when I was, you know, I said in the midst of fighting, if you remember, whenever the Oscars were happening, that was the impeachment. So we were in the midst of our fighting as Republicans, Democrats, and culture and everything like that. Yeah. that
Yeah.
all of a sudden we would have to test our devotions and then figure out whether we'd be our brother's keeper.
Yeah, I mean, it was fascinating. And just a backstory, as soon as our team got done with Real Experiences, I sent you an email and said, hey, man, thank you so much. This was amazing. By the way, my wife's looking for some part-time work. And if you happen to have anything, she loves movies and she loves to talk about them. And so if you have anything, and so out of that came actually going, well, yeah, I've actually got some stuff to do. And so now Denise has been a part of that team.
She's awesome too. Yay!
Yay, Denise.
She's
I
really
think so.
awesome.
I think so,
Yeah.
but I'm biased.
No, she's awesome. She works with us with R&D, so all of our testing of content, she's been tested on. Hopefully, she goes home and tests it on YouTube. So
She does. She does.
Anyway.
She does.
Yeah.
Well, listen, it's uncanny. I think
Yeah.
the whole idea of being our brothers and sisters keeper, I mean, for such a time as this, and, you know, as a church, clearly we're trying to do that. With social distancing, it makes it difficult because we have people saying we want to help, but you can't get anybody by anybody, right? You can't touch anybody. You've got to stay 6 feet away. And so that's been very challenging. You know, some of the things we've done is we're trying to call all of our people just to say, how are you doing? Calling families, praying with them. We're actually even have a group of people, and we just put it out to our church to make surgical masks, to say, hey, do you like to sew? You got some fabric? Here's some patterns. You can do this. And we've had a lot, men and women, who are saying, I can totally do this. By the way, for the men, I love that because it's like, hey, it's just a power tool. You're not using wood. You're just using fabric, right?
Right.
So we're providing meals for students who are, you know, lacking nutrition while school is closed, just things like that, providing financial support for a homeless community. But let me ask you this. Is there anything else that you could help us from this standpoint, not having people physical be able to go to Real Experiences and do it, but is there anything that our movies can tell our families as individuals, tell us about, as individuals or as couples, as we simply navigate this pandemic? What would you say?
You know, when I started looking at this, you know, there was a little phrase that you might have noticed in my my theme, and that was for the sake of our children. In a lot of the Oscar-nominated movies this year, there are children who are put in situations that are above their pay grade, meaning they're way too young to be dealing with this older thing that's going on. So a lot of movies have children like that. And when I looked at that, I went, you know, it's important for us right now to realize that our children will remember this moment, right?
Yeah.
And our children will remember what we did in this moment. Were we the people who were fearful? How did we respond especially based on our faith? How are we responding, you know, with a spirit of power, with a spirit of love, with a spirit, you know, of, you know, overcoming this? And so I think for me, I look at that as one thing that I feel like God's still working out. And even, you know, when you were saying, we're trying to be our brother's keeper, even in the midst of the social distancing. Isn't it cool that the idea of social distancing is your brother's keeper, right? Like we had to come to understand that we were actually being our brother's keeper by doing that. And for me, it's been hard. Like this is stupid. So, but you know, I like fast food, unfortunately. And so, you know, like I go to the fast food restaurant right now going, should I be eating fast food? Because maybe that germ is coming off the bag and, you know, and I'll spread it and all this stuff, you know, like there's stupid things like that where you're going, okay, I got to really examine my devotions, you know, am I devoted to the, so don't tell anybody, especially the state park. So hopefully they won't get this, but we have a national park near, you know, us, the Chattahoochee River. And man, I sneak into that place, even though they got the parking lot, you know, closed, because I'm like, gosh, I got to experience nature right now. My devotion to nature, my devotion to seeing God in nature is being tested by, you know, will I be my brother's keeper? But so I think there's going to be more of that. And I think, you know, I was listening to a radio today about the last pandemic in, you know, 1918, and they were doing a lot of kind of what happened then. And one of the things they said was sort of this waves, like they had a first wave and everybody did social distance. But then when the second wave came, people were like, I'm sick of this. I ain't going to do this anymore. And then by the third wave, people were like, I don't even believe the medical people anymore. I don't even believe it's working. And so I don't know if that'll play out, but, you know, God could test our devotion even stronger. And it really test, and I don't know if it's God. I'm just going to, well, obviously God's in control of the script, so we know that. So anything that's happening, he's in control of this and redeeming it. But could we be marching into something where, we're pretty good as people for a while and doing things, and being charitable and being nice, but then sin kind of creeps in and Satan creeping in. And then we start going, our nature is to be selfish. Our nature is to be prideful. And so suddenly I think we may see this deepen even further where we are going to be tested. And I would just keep thinking, what am I doing in relationship to the story that my children will tell of this moment? Because they're dealing with things that are above their pay grade right now.
Yeah. No, that's huge. I think that's huge. And I appreciate that. Listen, you're preaching, because that's what I want to say to our people, to say, look, Jesus modeled this, others focused, others. And so that really is what it is. It's like, look, when you can stop being myopic, when you can stop being self-involved, that's when you can say, man, as you say, I could be at risk of hurting someone else, of infecting someone else who might be more medically fragile, or people that you go, hey, it wasn't even about being medically fragile. This was a 20-year-old and they got it. And so I do think that's it. I think it's huge to say, look, this is going to push us to saying, hey, being more socially responsible. But as you said, look, our kids are going to have a longer memory of this than we will. And so what are we doing now to help form that for them? That's huge. That's huge. So you said before that you believe movies are modern day parables that the Lord can use to reach us through story. One of the things we do as a church is a teaching series we do is called At the Movies, and we get great feedback from it. And so as we prepare to shelter in place for even longer than any of us really want, what encouragement would you offer people as they find welcome distraction and comfort in their favorite movies that they like to watch at this time?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I really appreciate this question because I think you understand by doing that series, you kind of understand the power of movies in people's lives and how attracted we are to them. And a lot of times Christians see Hollywood and see movies as something frivolous. They see it as something, even, some people take it to extreme and see it as, Hollywood's evil and stuff like that. And I would just ask people at this moment in time, especially when so many people are dealing with their emotional health and well-being, really being I think that's the third wave coming. Like we've got, the health aspect of this, the economic aspect of it, but then the emotional aspect of this is just like going to be the long tail of this. And so for me, I think I would look at your movies right now as not, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I would look at it as a spiritual discipline, actually. Like watch movies right now and ask God, especially when a movie moves you, maybe it's to laughter, maybe it's to anger, especially. If a movie moves you to anger right now, I would just say, God, what are you trying to tell me right now? Yeah. But especially movies that are moving you in some direction, just use it as a spiritual discipline to say, I'm going to spend some time on this. I'm going to really look at what's the scene that makes me angry? Why is this making me angry? Or why am I crying right now at this? And I think God will honor that as a means of him saying, I'm trying to talk to you personally, like just you, not everybody in your family, not everybody, just you were moved by this. So let's have a conversation about this, And so I really think you can redeem Netflix right now and redeem all this by sitting here going, how can I use this as a means of God actually, speaking to my heart and seeing what's in my heart right now? Because a lot of us, I know me right now, I don't know about you, Rob, but I've been angry for no reason. And I know it's because I don't have any control over this situation, especially, I'm not going to be so gender biased, but especially as men who can't do anything. Yes. It's like all of a sudden anger starts just coming up in me in these waves. And I'm like, gosh, what's going on, God? And so I think there's a way in which we can do something so frivolous, it seems, as movies, where we can allow some of this to God to process it through our movies and give us a visual. So yeah, that's what I would say is
I love it. I think it's I love that perspective. I mean, to your point, Look, I don't think that they're frivolous at all. I mean, they are a way to distract us, but I love what you're saying. Hey, in your distraction, what emotions are being brought forward? What thoughts are being brought? Then present those to the Lord, right? What a great way to redeem that which you think might be frivolous. What maybe it's not so frivolous.
Exactly. Last night, I have to confess this because I was like, okay, I'm going to have to watch this Tiger King because I got to figure out what's going on with the culture. Like, why are we drawn to this?
Yes.
And as soon as I started watching it and I saw those animals in cages and I, found out the guy is in jail and it was all this kind of, should we be putting these animals in cages and stuff like that? I went, is anybody seeing this? This is all about confinement. Like, this is totally about confinement. The reason that we're drawn to this right now is because it's dealing with the concept of these animals in confinement. And then, of course, I think anytime we're in situations where we all feel like we're the same, we're drawn to the freak shows. So we're drawn to the things where people are like so crazy and so different, these reality shows that are doing that. And so even something like Tiger King, you could actually sit, and I'm not recommending it, but I'm just recommending.
I think it's a family-friendly show, if I understand.
It's definitely not a family-friendly show, just to disclaim that. But I do sit there and look at it and go, God, can you redeem that in me and have me look at this through the lens of confinement, and what am I looking at here, and how am I responding to this? Is it just a bunch of, is it escapism, like you said, or is it just a freak show that I'm laughing at, or is there something here that you're actually trying to work out in me?
Yeah, we're in this time where our freedom has been taken away. All of us.
Exactly. I was. I'm sorry. I got one more thing that I do the lectionary, which is where you read the passages, each day.
Yeah.
And there was a theme in the lectionary where it was like it was all about confinement. It was that's the thread I was getting out of it was just this issue of confinement. And all of a sudden in that moment, God brought to mind Shawshank Redemption, and that moment in Shawshank when Andy's put in solitary confinement. He comes back to the table and all the guys are ribbing him saying, how was it? And he's like, it was no big deal. Like, they can't steal hope out of me. They can't steal this music that's inside of me. And I started just like worshiping with that clip, and really worshiping and going, God, you are you so want us to be the people of hope in the midst of confinement. You want the Reds of this world, the Morgan Freeman characters, to go, hope is a dangerous thing. And yet we are the people with the music inside of us. We are the people who can be in confinement and actually see hope and inspire hope in the prison, right? That's what Andy does. He inspires hope in the midst of confinement. So I just, there's moments like that where I go, yes, movies can redeem so much. You can redeem these movies in such a way that allows God to even work it beside Scripture, to worship and to really to be a source of spiritual encouragement.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I fully agree. So let me ask you this: if as a couple or a family or even a business, we want to explore what our movies say about us, how we maybe even handle crisis or lies we might believe about ourselves, how could you help us dig deeper into this?
Yeah, so we saw this as an opportunity to really figure out, could we take what we do very much in a physical space and bring it to a virtual space? And so God had been working like a couple of months ago in me and going, hey, why not work on this concept of an app related to this? And so 2 months before now, this moment, I was working on an app. And then when this happened, I was like, oh, wow, I've got a tool here that I can use. And so we're actually doing testing. Our end of our testing is today with a Chick-fil-A team that we're working with. And for me right now, specifically our for-profit is working with corporations because we really feel like this disconnection. So if you have a team out there and you're feeling probably what everybody's feeling, which is, wow, how do I keep them engaged? How do I, really invest in their emotional health right now? And how do I create authentic connections, not just connection, but authentic connection?
Yeah.
Then we can help that. We found a virtual solution to that with a real experience. So that's one thing. And then the second thing on our nonprofit side, if it's small groups or marriage, couples or we did a small group last week. And so we're finding ways to help people in this disconnection find more authentic connection. So if you want information about that, just send me an email at real info, and that's REEL info at REEL experiences.com.
Okay.
And that'll come to me, come straight to me.
So good. So good.
Yeah. So we love to minister to folks. I feel like, well, it's too much information, but there's a friend of mine who told me, he said, Bryan, you're in the business. He told me this like years ago. He said, Bryan, you're in the business of solving a disconnection epidemic that most people don't know they have. And so all of a sudden when this happened, I was like, well, everybody knows what a disconnection epidemic looks like now. And so we are kind of trying to see ourselves as almost front lines of people's emotional health, and so we'd love to serve in any way we can right now by doing something as crazy as people's movies and fun as people's movies as a way of helping them process this moment and see that God is still affirming their story and affirming their desires and that kind of thing.
That's so good. Well, listen, we've talked about this. I think we even possibly had it on the calendar, but now we had to cancel it, about bringing you and your team in to do a date night for us that we could actually have at the church. And so whenever all the social distancing is over, I'm sure we'll put that back on the calendar. Listen, brother, thank you so much. You've been an absolute gift. I appreciate your friendship, but just creatively, I just love what you're doing. I want more and more people to be able to experience this. Thanks so much. I hope that while North Metro, while you're at home, you're with your families and we all are watching movies. I know that's one thing we do as a family. Just, man, look into it. Think about some of the things Bryan talked about and ask those questions. And if you're whatever emotions that you might find yourself, bring those to the Lord and say, Lord, what is this? And even wondering about that, think, well, what is the common thread in my movies? I don't know. They can help you out to a very detailed extent, but just start asking those questions. Bryan, thank you. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, I will say something real quickly to parents.
Yeah.
So I know you're watching a lot of Frozen 2 right now and things like that. But I would say if you want to take the emotional temperature of your child, especially younger children, not teenagers, but with your elementary school, even middle school kids, I would just ask them simple questions after they've watched a movie. Something like, so which character do you identify with? So if it's Toy Story, like, are you Buzz or are you Woody? Or do you feel like Buzz today? And know that it's just that day. Like, it's how they're feeling that day. It's not their whole identity and who they are, and they'll be Buzz for life. But just like asking them, so who do you feel like today? Do you feel like Buzz? And then asking, why, or what moment did they like the most? What moment they found funny? Just as a way of kind of taking their temperature and having a good conversation. Sorry, I had to interject that. When you were talking about families at North Metro, I was like, that might be just a simple tool to, especially with younger kids, to be able to help right now. But thank you, Rob. And by the way, I do have my favorite character that I want to show as my virtual background right now.
Yes.
So this is my favorite character.
Oh no.
Boom.
You're the only one, my man. Well, hey, again, thank you so much. Really, really grateful for your time and all that you do. Thanks so much, my friend.
Rob.
All
Appreciate
right.
the time, man.
You bet.